cheating and conspiracy to obtain and accept corrupt payments charges they deny. Visit us online at www.ncnguyana.com.
The news was produced by NCN.
It is a program which brings you information and facts about a wide variety of topics.
Instinctively, most of us know this, but a human being can live without food for more than a month.
Groceries, then visit Bunny's Meat Market on Church Street.
At the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton, where I did chemical engineering. And I think that the current technology is fantastic and so on. I would put technology in front as I would put people's worldview and their perception as the more important, element. I recall some of the slogans of the Chinese in the 60s, maybe when they were still maybe having famines and looking for food and receiving maybe food support. One of the slogans went that in time we will have not only what the Americans have, but even what they do not have. And that was a hell of a lot of faith to be making those statements then, but in our lifetimes we happen to live at a particular, I have happened to live at a particular time which has seen China and now India move from the positions they were, and to some extent South Korea, to where they are today. And I would say that it is more people's individual worldview, their understanding of the world, and so on, their motivation, what they think is fair and acceptable, how they relate to each other, that those are the more important issues. Once those are set, the science and technology will happen, and it will be managed to the benefit of society. But if those issues are not in place, the science and technology is less likely to happen. And what happens, the science and technology that does happen is likely to be put to uses that we would not want.
On the social front, then, how do you see the ethnicity issue?
I don't hold to the view that Guyana is a divided country, because what has happened in Guyana is that 6 different sets of people were thrown together here in Guyana, and each with a complete system of language, religion, style and fashion, and they're thrown together here in Guyana. And they therefore are forced to live together, and to some extent they then have to close the distances between them. So my view is Guyana is a country of 6 peoples coming together, and we've closed a lot of distance, but there's still some distance to close. I would say that in the days from slavery, with the Indian and Chinese and Portuguese immigrants coming to replace the black African freed slaves on the estates, that would have had potential conflict, like black legs in trade union talk. That would have had, but nevertheless, there were many areas where there were individuals getting together. And I would say that maybe overall, I would say what I read, heard, sensed, it seems that closure was taking place. Groups were coming together from very different positions, Christian position versus Hindu and Muslim positions. People were coming together. Yes, maybe the British and the English, the colonials and others exploited the differences, but the differences were there before, they exploited it. And I would say from the time, I would say that the view of many of the Afro-Guyanese was that they had come to Guyana earlier, they had seen Indians arrive, they had been working in the public service and close to the British, and they had assumed, they had experienced a lot of discrimination, and they had assumed that when independence came, they would replace the British as the rulers. And I think many of them felt they knew how the British ruled, how the governor behaved and what he did. And so they felt honestly and earnestly that they would do a good job. I think many of them felt at the same time that they had seen the Indians arrive, that the Indians were brothers and sisters, but they were younger brothers and sisters, and that their time would come, but it was not their time. Many of the Africans in Guyana had that sentiment, that worldview. So when independence came in '66, and when the British, and mainly pushed by the Americans at the time, carried the propaganda against Chedi Jagan and the PPP, that they were communists and so on and so on. And when, by I guess, all sorts of signals suggested that they would prefer to have Forbes and the PNC rather than Chedi Jagan and the PPP in power. And Forbes and these people could do whatever they needed to do that. You had rigged elections from 1968. The British and the Americans kept quiet, or more than that, might have said it was okay, it was proper, and so on. That period, I think, slowed down and halted in many ways the coming together of our people. And when the Cold War ended in 1990, and there was no more, they felt the need in the Americans and in the West to keep Chedi Jagan and PPP out of power because of the fear of communism. You then had them supporting, through former President Carter, the restoration of fair and free elections, which Chedi and the PPP were.
Would you say that the elections are now fair and free, and especially the coming elections will be fair and free? I think
the elections are fair and free, and have been so since then, but there is an issue where particularly the older PNC supporters, older Afro-Guyanese, and to some extent some of the older Indian families feel that are fearful that the PPP will always be in power. So the issue is not fair and free elections only. It's an issue for them is that we should have time in government too. Okay. And that's the concern. So you have actually lots of talk on fair and free elections, but you know, you also have heard the talk of shared governance, which to many people outside of the PPP civic means that we should have ministers. So I think what many people want is that not only the seats in Parliament should be distributed according to the results of the elections, but also the ministry should be distributed in that way, because there's a fear in the supporters in the parties other than the PPPC that they would never be in the majority and get into government. So that I think, and I think though so you have had mixed up, you now get mixed up the issue of fair and free election and the question whether government would change. So those two issues are mixed up. There's fair and free elections, you can have that, and one group could be in government forever, and that is not satisfying. But so I think that is more the situation we have in Guyana. The feeling out there that the PPP civic will always be winning the election. Well, the last elections, 2006, was surprisingly very incident-free, even though in April before the elections, the one of the ministers, Minister Sashaw, and 3 other siblings were brutally executed, shot
really?
down in their home just a bit up the coast here. And that created in me too a great fear of what would happen. But it turned out surprisingly incident-free, although one may relate it to the fact that subsequent to that there was a big robbery attempt in Rose Hall, and you hear that numbers involved were anywhere from the 8 to 25, like 3 different groups. The group was divided themselves into 3, and one set that ended up on the Kanji Creek. Either things went wrong or some slip up, and they were the police and the army all in. They ended up, they ended up being killed in that in those battles. I think to some extent that event might have also been a damper on any subsequent violence in the 2006 election.
Now, for the Guyanese abroad, how would you encourage them to come back, and what would you say that they should come back to?
Okay, I would say here again is a matter of worldview. I think that the world is now very much one, and all humanity is one. And yes, I welcome back Guyanese who want to return home, and therefore will come home on their own. I would say I'm inclined to the view that Guyana should be open to whoever else wants to come to Guyana and make an honest living in Guyana. Because I would say anyone in Guyana now who has a young son or daughter and goes up and finishes high school and is doing well, who wants to become a top doctor or a top lawyer or a top engineer, migrates to the States where he thinks there's the potential for those possibilities. Even in the USA there's movement, and in all other countries there's movement from their rural areas to the larger urban areas. And I think there is that same movement from Guyana and the West Indies places to the metropolitan areas in the USA and Canada now. Previously it was the UK, but now it is mostly Canada and the US. So let me say that my main message to the folks abroad is that you should always do your best. I would urge that also that contributing, you should always endeavor to make a contribution to wherever you are at, in your workplace or where you live in your community. Always set out to make a good contribution. It's worth it. There is prevailing now the view that, like 50 Cent sings, get rich quick or die trying. I think we should be, whilst we understand those yearnings, we should also understand that people are great, communities are great to the extent that we make contribution to the larger group, to the good. We should understand too that we have to be useful, that we earn our place and we secure our place in our company or in our society to the degree that we are useful to the company and to the society. So it's good to be useful and to be used. It's a good thing. For Guyana, I would say there's the contribution of remittances to people, friends and families still in Guyana, the visits here to help, the outreaches from time to time, and also the welcoming of people coming up from Guyana in there and showing them the way, helping them to find their feet. Those are things.
Okay, Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Okay, good.